the first session, we talked about vision and strategy, and I like to call it strategery. Strategy is a really tricky word, especially when it comes to thinking about your business. We want to spend a lot of time or sometimes no time on strategery, but getting it right and getting the formula right and putting the pieces in places are the difference between succeeding and failing, certainly. We're in a time where undoubtedly it is perhaps more important than ever to be strategic about the things that we're doing. So the reason being is because we are in a new world in terms of what we can come to see and find and expect within the AV community. And I don't know about you, the most recent AVIXA Industry Outlook and Awareness study that I've looked at has us getting back on track, probably not to the place that we've been, at least in a year, but within 2 to 3 years, you're going to see this thing come roaring back. AV is no longer a cottage industry. It's a very important and relevant one. And so the time is now to really start thinking about the future. And like Stacy said, this is what I do. So I am a strategic advisor to technology companies. I also work heavily in the brand experience industry. I am passionate about helping to bring to the world what I call the connected brand experience. Topic for another day. So that said, if you do have questions, Stacy is monitoring the chat window and she'll make sure that they pop up on my screen. And I am going to be inviting interaction throughout the session today. But let me just start with the overall objectives. There's 4 things that we're going to try to accomplish today. First is, how do we translate our vision into a plan? Second, how do you prioritize the most important aspects of the business? Third, how do you know if you're on or off track? Fourth, how do you build an organizational consistency and execution rhythm? The net of all of these things, I believe, is really the difference between good companies and great companies. It's the difference also between executing at a mediocre level and executing at a high level. You can't not have a strategy. You can't just be responding to inbound requests. We're in a world now, particularly in the AV world, where we have to find ways to differentiate. The challenge is what might be in your head as a business leader may be very, very different from what the rest of your company thinks or feels. More importantly, what are your customers thinking when they're interacting with you? Now, I like to start with analogies and stories, and this is one that is near and dear to me. That is not me running, although I wish I was that good. I have run there. I am a sort of an aspiring marathoner, I should say. Earlier in life, I got on an exercise regimen that pointed me towards spending a lot of time out on the road and running. And I have had a chance in my life to complete 10 different marathons, as well as continue to run and cycle. These are things that I'm very passionate about. But I want to tell you a story about one marathon in particular. It is the St. George Marathon. In fact, if anyone here is from the West Coast or from somewhere between Nevada, Salt Lake, Denver, maybe San Diego or LA, you may or may not know about this particular marathon. I've run it 3 different times. The first time was a disaster. I mean, disaster. The second time was okay, and the third time was a charm. It took me a few times to effectively get this particular marathon right. And there's a little bit of a secret to this marathon. It looks like it's downhill. I mean, take a look at the elevation spread here, right? You're talking about 5,300 feet down to 2,600 feet from mile 15 to mile 26, all downhill, right? Wrong. If you look closely at some of these markers, particularly between mile 7 and mile 9, you see we go uphill. And we don't just kind of go uphill, we go up a mountain. It's an old volcano called Veo. And if you look at between mile 18 and 19, it looks relatively flat, but it's not as flat as you might think. The reality is there is no way to really predict how well you might do on a marathon at St. George, because a lot of people underestimate exactly what's going on with regards to the road and the hills. Now, this is a great analogy because one of my favorite acquisitions of 2020 has been my Garmin GPS watch. Now, what's great about the GPS technology these days, and I should say really any smart device, if you're an Apple iWatch wearer or you're using something else, is the fact that we have incorporated now with technology extensive amounts of data. And that data really helps us understand what it is that we're doing when we're exercising, running marathons, or otherwise. This is a snapshot of an application that I use, and some of you may also be. I'd love you to sort of weigh in on the chat window here. Stacey, I'm going to ask you how many people are actually this. But this is my window on Strava. Strava.com, you can check it out. It is an exercise application tracker that literally takes the data from my watch or the data from my phone, whatever I happen to be tracking with, and it gives me an analysis of how it went. I recently ran a half marathon. You can see I'm not the fastest guy. You know, I'm averaging 9s and 10s. But the fact of the matter is, I don't just have distance. I have pace setting. I have heart rate variation. I even have milestones. If you look across the distribution, it'll tell me a little bit about the distributed elevations. It'll tell me a little bit about what my splits look like. Splits meaning same amount of time across a multiple, period. And what I'm really trying to show you here is, look at these intervals. So I got a 5K, 10K, 15K, 20K. Each one is timed. They're pretty close to each other, 33:04, 34:12, 33:32. They're within a few minutes of each other, but they are different. And if you look at the differences are really related to things like pace, heart rate, elevation. Those all are factors that go into making a great run happen. Well, here's a picture of me finishing that marathon. This was back on Saturday, October 4th, 2008. It's it was that third magical race. I had a goal of breaking 4 hours. I was too cheap to actually buy the picture at the time, but that's a proof of me actually running. Something magical happened in this race for me, and it was the fact that I broke 4 hours. 3 hours, 58 minutes, 39 seconds. My net pace that was different from the actual gun shot at the beginning was 3 hours, 54 minutes, 41 seconds. I had a goal to beat 4 hours. In order to get there, I had to manage getting done very, very carefully. I had to understand my splits. I had to understand elevation. I had to understand what my energy levels were going to look like in order for me to finish exactly where I did. And that was after multiple tries. I think I shared that this was my third try at this particular marathon, and it was probably my, goodness, I would say 7th marathon at this point. So I'd never broken the 4-hour marathon until that point. Let me put this into context now. So translating, oh yeah, go ahead, Stacy, please.
Just wanted to let you know we do have a Strava fan, so you're not alone.
Nice. Well, then friend me on Strava because I'm a huge Strava fan. I just got into using Zwift, the Zwift application for both running and biking. But I'm a huge data junkie when it comes to exercise and all the data that is available now. So what I want to do is I want to translate this now into your business and with your vision. If my vision was to finish a marathon sub 4, your business objective may be to hit the $5 million mark or the 10 million, or maybe it's the 50 or the $100 million mark. Whatever your vision is, your people, generally speaking, are going to either align with you or not. Statistically speaking, Gallup tells us that only 22% get it. Now think about that for a minute. 1 in 5 people understand what your business is trying to do. That's staggering, right? It's like if you could get half, that'd be wonderful. If you could get, anywhere between, 50% and higher, I think we'd all be, doing backflips. And if you feel like you're higher than that, congratulations, good for you. Keep moving. If you're above that, I want to challenge you with a question. Are you really there? Is that really where you are? And I want to invite you now to take a quick self-assessment. So grab a sheet of paper, your laptop, whatever you're using. I'm going to ask you a handful of questions. We're going to do a quick self-assessment. I want you to be honest. You do not have to share your answers, but I'm going to give you a chance to in a moment. Here's the first one. Our company mission statement states our company's purpose. Yes or no? So there is no kinda here, right? I want you to say yes or no, one or, check or check. You decide. But this would imply that you actually have a mission statement, and it does imply what you're all about. Here's question 2. Our company's mission statement fits the current market environment. Yes or no? Question number 3. Our company mission statement is based on our core competencies. We basically say and do the same thing. We don't talk about something we don't do. Question 4. Our company mission statement is motivating and inspires employees' commitment. People get excited about what our mission is all about. Question 5. Our company mission statement is realistic. Yes or no? 6. Our company mission statement is specific, short, focused, and memorable. Be honest. Rather than answer that question for yourself, answer it for some of your people. How would they answer that question? Our company mission statement is clear and easily understood. Our company mission statement says what the company wants to be remembered for. Yes or no? 9. Our company mission statement is actually written down on a piece of paper or on a wall or on a napkin, but it is written. And the last question is, our company mission statement is reflected in our places, spaces, and branding. Like, you actually can see the mission statement come to life in places, spaces, and branding. I'm not talking about just your building. I'm talking about places, spaces, and branding as it relates to your company. All right, I want you to total up your yeses, total up your nos, and I want you to give yourself a 1 for every yes, and I want you to give yourself a -1 for every no, and I want to hear what the net scores are. So if you got a quick score, basically a no neutralizes your yes. Okay, so I want you to, if you're willing to, pop in some of your scores into the chat and see how you did. So anything north of a 0 is good. Congratulations, you have a baseline. If you've -0, if you're like anything less than a 0, this is the webinar for you. And if you're somewhere in between both, sit tight. I'm sure that there's something that I'm going to share with you today that will be useful. So Stacy, I got to go to you live. What are we seeing in the chat window as it relates to the scores?
I rated Herman as a 6.
That's really high. That's good.
And I have Desiree, who is on here. She's giving her team a 3.
Okay, good. That sounds super honest to me.
And so I am waiting to hear from the rest of the audience. And if they're not careful, I might take them off of mute and ask them to speak out loud.
Well, I want to hold that one because I'm going to have somebody else come off on live in just a second. But I'll tell you what, the spread of scores you gave are the ones that I would expect. So high or low, I told you, if anything north of a 0 is actually good, because it means you're trending in the right direction. A negative means this is totally relevant for you. Bringing it to north of 0 is a really great thing, and it's something that your business should definitely do.
All right, I got a couple more people who jumped in.
Okay, here we go. Yeah.
I got another 3.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 looks like what we got. And I have someone who said, a mission statement is great, but following through and being accountable to these statements are much, much more important. Actions speak louder than words. So
we're going there. We're going there. Yeah, for sure. I think there's nothing that speaks louder than action. And again, what we're going to talk about here in the next couple of minutes is why action is accompanied by clarity. Clarity of your purpose is one of the differences between being able to execute at a high level and not. Writing it down is a great exercise, and it does require action. So I want you to look at a couple of major brands, see if you can guess who these are. So here's a mission statement example. And we're talking about clarity: to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Who said that? Google, right? And does Google's actions match its words? 100%. Let's take a look at another one. To make all athletes better through passion, design, and the relentless pursuit of innovation. Who said that? Well, if you guessed Under Armour, you would be correct. Here's another one. To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood, and a neighborhood at a time. It's a little bit misleading. You probably already know who this one is. Starbucks. Does Starbucks do that? 100%. Their words match. Memorable. Here's another one. To refresh the world, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness, to create value and make a difference. Now, this is one you might not necessarily connect initially, but you'll get it when you see the logo, Coca-Cola, right? So these are major B2C brands for the most part. There's a couple of B2B brands, embedded within these as well. But you can see that the alignment between a mission statement, here's PayPal's, there is in pretty good clarity with a few words, a quick explanation of what the company is effectively all about. Now, I like to think about when you're going down the path of clarifying what it is your organization's trying to do. There's a journey, right? The journey starts with a near term and a long term, right? Both are important because you got to know where you're going, right? But in the near term, if you don't really assess honestly where you are right now, you're going to have a hard time getting to where you're trying to go. Now, I like to think of it over an annualized basis, looking something like this. If there's 365 days in the year, the day one and then the 365th day, you have a, let's call it, financial target. Here's where I'd like to be. The reality is we do not track linear to any kind of objective or like this. I would venture to guess that everybody on this call's business is spiky. The reality also is that when we set goals, a lot of times we set a goal, we forget about the goal, and then we come back to the goal. It might look something more like this, right? Where effectively we're not thinking about the goal at all until the last quarter of the year. Then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, I got a goal. We got to figure out how we're going to close the gap on it. Now, that may be you as a business owner or leader thinking about it in that phase, but you might also move back further to the left-hand side, and I would ask the question, does the whole company know what the company's goals are? If there's a financial metric, do they know what the financial metric is? If there's a profitability target, do they know what the profitability target is? That's all decided really at number one, at day one. And the challenge that I think this presents into our business is this plays out most definitely in execution. When you're only thinking about it towards the end of the equation, the probability of you actually achieving your initial target is very, very low. And so I would say that goaling in this particular scenario may be a useless exercise. Now, I've been generous here to show, hey, we actually still grew. The reality is a lot of times when goaling is done without a clear line of sight to execution, the goaling will be much worse. You'll probably, in many cases, do worse than you did in the current year. So when you retreat or retract as a business, my hypothesis is, and my experience, what I've seen with a number of different companies, was lack of clarity against their goaling and lack of accountability around what they were trying to do. Now, I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of different companies, and I ask this question all the time. What's your 10-year aspiration? And it looks something like this, right? It's always, oh my gosh, we're going to go to the moon. We're going to, establish the first this, and this, and we're going to be a household name. The reality is that the business really more creeps like this, certainly without a strategic plan and potentially without the rudder. And so a 10-year vision is just that, a vision. It's an aspiration. It goes even beyond the 10 years. 10 years in tech world is like almost impossible to think about. Even though I know some of our businesses have been around for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, maybe even more, the reality is what was envisioned 10 years ago was probably not as lucid and clear as a shorter term view. So the year 5 and the year 3 become better. Anything past year 5, in my estimation, is crystal ball. And the reason being is because things change far too much to be super predictable about everything and how it's going to happen. Now, there's a way to leverage the ambiguity of the crystal ball to do what I call these major inflection points in what your strategy should reflect. Your 5-year vision and your 3-year vision are 2 points along a line, including your year 1 realities, that if you drew a line through the 2 of them, you can have a much better line of sight to predict what 10-year could look like. So we always talk about, in geometry or in navigation, anytime we have 2 or more points, we can triangulate a trajectory. So what I'm talking about today is, how do you tighten up the view between year 5, year 3, year 1, so that you can get a better line of sight of what your long-term proposition is. And those objectives may be different. I think that there's also a rhythm that can happen in year 1 that many people underestimate. Again, the strategy here is give yourself as many points of triangulation as you can to be way more predictable in the outcome. If you only have 1 point of triangulation today, and meaning it's a near term, then you're only going to be as good as near term. I think you get the point. Now, I call this a cadence. If you're musically inclined, you're going to recognize exactly what this picture is. If you're not, let me help you. We've lettered it. A, B, C, and D are different different lines within this musical score. But you'll see at the end of A, the end of B, the end of C, and the end of D is a musical chord. It is called a resolution chord. The reason why it's important is because the movement within that first 4 notes of A, B, C, or D resolves into a sound that makes sense. The 4 steps within A, B, C, and D are not always going to make sense. They'll melodically sound good, but they will move, right? And the fact of the matter is that this chord progression sounds beautiful the further that I move through the experience. Now, you could very easily substitute A, B, C, and D with Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, or maybe year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and so on and so forth. But what you need is a melodic, harmonic configuration of the cadence of your business. Music speaks volumes, and it's one that I think really helps us understand. Now, what should be in this view? If you're taking a look at year 1, 3, and 10, start with 10 as an expression of vision, right? And this is about as much as you can do with it. It is a single statement. It's a long-term aspiration, and it's expressed as a target. Now, if your goal is to be a $100 million company, that can be a business target. But your aspiration of what you will do to be a $100 million company is the most important part of what you define in your 10-year. If you look at year 3, what you'll find is that it is a vivid description of your business. Directionally, it becomes more specific as it relates to revenue targets and profit targets. And I think most importantly, it starts to outline the key metrics. The metrics are important because they begin to triangulate the journey. Now, there is a year 1. A year 1 is very detailed. Specific action plan, specific revenue targets, specific profit targets, detailed metrics, annual goals, quarterly targets, weekly routines. Year 1 is where you need to live, right? And year 1 even is long. And I'm going to show you why that's the case here in just a moment. But year 1, year 3, year 10, that's really the horizon. Don't get wrapped up in thinking too much beyond year 3 and 5. I think 5 is an inflection point, but 3 makes a lot of sense. Year 10 is where I see a lot of people get tripped up. They're so wrapped up in where they want to be. They're thinking about their exit strategy the first year they started the business. And while it's good to think about the exit strategy without a clarity of what the first couple of years are going to look like is going to be problematic. So here's my invitation to you. How much of your current 1-year plan reflects these elements below? So take a look at year 1, and I want you to ask this question: how much? So if you said about 60% of that or 50% of that. Number 2, I want you to draft 5 to 8 vivid descriptions of the future of your business. And those may fall into your 3-year or your 10-year category. This clearly can't be done right this second, but we'll take a snapshot of the screen. We'll or just even reflect on this question as you're capturing this in your notes. And then the third question here is there one thing that stands out to you right now as a significant need? And that's for you to really wrestle with. You probably can see something within 1, 3, and 10 that is thematic. And some of the ones that I hear are, man, our culture needs to change. We've got broken culture, we need to fix it. Or I see others that say we are oversubscribed into too many businesses. We got to zero in on the 1 or 2 things that we do really well. Or I see another one that says we want to move from being an AV provider to an AV innovator. And in order for us to get there, we have to change how we think about innovation. Those are examples. So in the chat window, if there's an impression you have, either a one thing or a reflection on what your current 1-year plan looks like, Stacy, I'm going to come back to you now for anybody who's inputting those answers into the chat window. What are some of the reactions that you have to this? And Stacy, I'll ask you first. As you look at something like this, how has long-range planning sort of affected how you do things at Herman?
You know what? I guess we spend a lot of time in year 1 and less time in year 3 and 10, and I'm not even sure if we're clear on 10. And because we were recently purchased, that also changes. So I think that's probably something we have to revisit. But certainly we we have our quarterly targets, we meet weekly, we have our annual goals and meet on those. So our revenue targets and profit targets are all set. So we have that. I think we have that part down. But our vision has changed from last year to this year because of our recent purchase. So
Yeah, definitely it affects it, and how that plays out and how it causes recalibration needs for sure. Good. Any input from our guests and participants on the webinar today?
no comments on this particular 1, 3, and 10 perspective.
I think it's causing deep introspection, which is an important reflective moment. All right, so let's take this to the next level. We're going to amp this up a little bit. How do you prioritize, right? So when we're talking about prioritizing the business, and we're looking at a 1, 3, 5, and a 10. Let me tell you a quick story to set this up. My son to the right here, we were on a trip pre-COVID to Italy, and we had a chance to go to one of my favorite gelaterias. If you've ever been to a gelateria, it's, oh man, I love gelato, right? It's not ice cream. We could argue on the intricacies of ice cream, but my son, when he walks up to the stand, literally looks back at me, he says, "Dad, which one?" And is this not true in business, right? It's like all of the propositions look interesting. How do we pick the ones that are the most appealing to the business, like they're going to have the greatest return for the business? And I say there's like this double, thing going on. There's number one, the busyness of the business. And then I think there's this part 2, which is, hey man, we got to hustle to actually make things come to reality. We can't just sit by idly waiting for the business to change or to evolve. Now, consider this statistic. 9%, only 9% of executives feel strongly that their actions are aligned to the needs of the business. In other words, 1 in 10 or 1 in 10 executives feel like they're spending their time on the right stuff. So alignment's a problem, right? Generally speaking. So I want you to take a little quiz here. This is going to be a scale, 1 to 10. This kind of help you with your own self-assessment. Here comes the first question. Our business has ample time to work its most important issues right now. 1 to 10. So the question is, we got plenty of time to work through our problems. Or if a 10 would mean you're doing it great. A 1 or a 2 or a 3 would say we're so slammed with our problems that we hardly have enough time to deal with them. Okay. Next question. Yes, go ahead.
Let's cover that one real quick. I got a couple on that one. So we've got a 5.
Okay.
And a 2. It looks like. So I would definitely say that we don't always sit in that category, and we got an 8, so that's a good.
Okay, that's great. So congratulations to the 8. My condolences to the 2. I mean,
I got a 3.
I got a 3. So here's the reality, right? Your 8s, 9s, and 10s, great job. The difference from moving from 8 to 9 and 9 to 10 will be fundamentally transformational to your business. The 3s and the 5s, man, you have no idea what's around the corner for you when you figure out how to carve time. Carving time is tricky. Let's look at another aspect of this. Question 2. Our company has a clear set of must-do actions for the next 90 to 180 days. So what I mean by this is everybody knows what's got to get done 3 months from today or 6 months from today. 1 to 10. Any numbers here, Stacy? We got a couple of them. We're going to go. I'm sensitive to time as well, but any
We've got another 8.
Good.
We've got a couple 2s, or a 6, a
Okay,
7,
good.
a 6, a 7.
Good. So this is good. We definitely got our hands wrapped a little bit better, it sounds like, in the next 90 to 180 days. Let's take a look at this one. Everyone in the company knows what the main priorities and actions are for the business over that same time period. So not just you as a leader, but you could ask anybody in the business and they would say, yep, that is a top priority.
I got a 4.
Yep.
I got
Okay.
an 8. I got an
Good.
8. I got a 2.
Got a 2. Okay, I would expect a bigger spread on a question like this because this reflects communications within the business. So it says, is the business communicating the priorities or is it just talking, right? Are we getting into specifics? Here's another one. Every individual can track their actions today on the company's stated top priorities. So a person knows that what they're doing is connected to what the company's trying to get done. What do we got, Stacy?
Nobody wants to answer that question.
So this is a hard one,
I got
right?
1 8. I got 1 8.
Okay, so our 8 is solid. So congrats to the 8 is like, and again, the difference between 8 and 9, I mean, we're just tuning at this point. You know, you're running the sub 4-hour marathon within 5 minutes of getting there. So you're there. You know, you just that last 2 points are just basic things that you could do. Here's another question.
I got a 3.5 and a 2. So
3.5 and a 2. Okay, check this one out. Our leadership team understands the difference between near-term needs and long-term execution. So our leadership gets the difference between 90 and 180 days and 3 years or 5 years.
well, I got a 2 on one of those.
Yeah. Yep. Leadership discord plays out. If you've ever heard the phrase, as go the leaders, so go the rest. So if the leaders are confused, guaranteed everyone's confused, right?
Yep. I got a 4, 2 4s.
All right.
Got a 3.
Very, very honest, very honest. All right, I'm going to give you a tool. This is going to be hopefully one of the things that's well worth your time today. Do you suffer from the BUSY-NESS Syndrome? You know, it's not a good thing to just be busy. It's to be busy for the right things, right? So I want to describe 2 scenarios. The first is the power of the sun and the power of a laser, okay? When we stand outside in the sun, aside from being warmed, what's the worst thing that can happen to us? We get sunburned. Now, we get really bad sunburn if we're not taking precautions. So I want to be, you know, cognizant of that. But as I sit here in Detroit today, I see the sun shining outside. And for the most part, I will feel its warmth, but I won't necessarily get burned to a shred. Versus a laser. A laser cuts, right? And if that light is really concentrated in a very specific way, a laser can be extremely powerful. And the same is true in your business. So let's look at the 1-year program again. If I start with the goal on day 1 and I look at my goal for the end of the year, what we're going to be looking at is, again, sort of that aspiration of, man, if it was linear, it would be great. The reality is, a lot of times we will lose our way, and it's because of how we're genetically wired. So what this picture right here represents is the attention span difference between a human and a goldfish. I want you on the chat window to tell me how many of you say humans have longer attention spans or goldfish have longer attention spans. If you vote humans, put it in. If you vote goldfish, put it in. Stacy, who's the more evolved species, humans or goldfish? Did I lose you, Stacy?
Yeah, sorry, I stopped there. I've got 4 goldfish and 1 human.
Well, there we go. Okay, so here's the data. The average human has a 9-second attention span. The average goldfish, 8.25 seconds. Congratulations. We are the less evolved species when it comes to our attention span. Did you know that the average exercise program lasts about 90 to 100 days? If you go online and you look at exercise programs, you're going to find programs that are called 2 weeks to fitness, 30-day hot zone workout zone, 90-day weight loss program. And the reason being is because we can't think past that long. Most New Year's resolutions start in January. They're over long before spring break, right? And the fact of the matter is that is also true in the business. If you set a goal 1 year hence, the reality is you are probably going to have the attention span for its first quarter, and then you are going to lose its attention span for the rest of the year. And the way that that plays out is you have to find a better way to delineate the difference between what would be considered a goal and what would be considered near-term action. If you want to get the best out of your year, stop thinking about it as a year and start thinking about it as 4 quarters, 4 shorter sessions that are tuned to genetically how we're wired and gives us a much better sense of sprints. And what we call these are rocks. So the reason why we call them rocks really goes into the notion of getting smaller stuff, bigger stuff done over a shorter period of time towards the annual objective. So if you've never heard this analogy before, follow this with me for a second. We got a jar, we got rocks, we got pebbles, we got sand. Your objective is to put all 3 of those into the jar. And usually this is how it goes. We put in the sand, we put in the rocks, and then we try to put in the big rocks and it doesn't fit. And you would say, goodness, I mean, you actually go try this at home. It's a lot of fun. Do this with your team and make this point. The reality is that when we prioritize what looks like the bigger thing, which ends up being the smaller thing, and that is the sand and the pebbles, we miss really achieving what's the most important big things first. What should happen is the big things get done first that are filled in with the pebbles, the smaller things, and then sand goes around it, right? And the reason being is a little grain of sand cannot have the same effect that a big rock can. And so we start to adopt this methodology and this mindset within the business that says we are going to break our year into quarters. We're going to look at our quarters as achieving major rocks, not pebbles of sand, or not pebbles and not sand. Pebbles and sand will happen within the pursuit of those individual rocks. Now let me paint this out for you. So a rock has to be specific. It's a big thing in the business that says effectively what needs to get done. A rock has to be measurable. We have to be able to identify how we know that the rock is done. It has to be achievable and relevant and or realistic, right? So meaning it's like we can achieve it, the realistic portion, and relevant in the sense that it's actually going to do something. It's going to move the needle for us. And the last part is time bound, right? Is that there's a specific date related to the rock and when it's going to be completed. This is the SMART methodology. So when we're looking at quarterly objectives that go into building a plan against our annual plan, what we want to do is we don't want to settle for vague and ambiguous things to get done. For example, achieve our sales target. That is not specific, right? Versus achieve $100,000 in sales in January at 35 points gross profit. You see what I just did? I made it specific and measurable. Now the question is it achievable? you know, we might have to make bigger changes to get to those numbers, but we know when we're going to do it, and we know that it's important to the business. So look at this way of thinking about taking away an action here. First, I want you to go home with your team in an upcoming meeting, and I want you to brainstorm a list of 5 to 7 major activities, rocks, that need to get done in the next 90 days. Now, the key to this trick here is when you do your brainstorm list, it's not going to be 5 to 7. It's going to be like 50 or 40 or 30. There's going to be a lot of things, grains of sand, right? Your job is to whittle that list down from the 30 or 40 to maybe 10 or 15, and then combine them, rewrite them, and focus them using a SMART methodology to get it to 5 to 7. If you can do this, this is going to give you tremendous speed. And if you get the rock done before the end of the quarter, guess what? Put another rock in there. Always maintain a list of 5 to 7. Now, when you're writing those rocks, I already talked about, are they smart? Test them. And then the way that you're going to know whether or not you've made progress against it is you're going to track it over the next 90 days. And I call this getting something not just done, but I call it done, done, done. Like it's done and buried, and we got it, and we know it, and it's not kind of done, right? It's completely done. So I want to transition into another theme on this, and let's dig a little bit deeper into how do we know whether or not we're tracking. So I call this the on track, off track methodology. In a running example, I know if I'm on track or off track just purely based upon my times, my heart rates. We actually have heart rate zones that reflect how we're doing, right? So if our heart rate zone is in the light to moderate, we might be able to go for a long way. If it's in the hard to maximum, we're going to burn out pretty fast. There's benefits and disadvantages to each heart rate zone, but we're going to know what those differences look like. So what I'm saying is within the business, there's also a benefit to learning something from the principle of a scorecard. So when you look up at a scorecard and you can see what the score is, what the time is on the clock, what quarter we're in, what players on the board, how many fouls, how many points, how much time is left. This is going to tell us effectively what it is that we need to know. So if we go back into our fiscal year and we're looking at 4 quarters, remember we have that goal, we have that objective of where we want to get to. What we're going to do is we're going to realize that the way that we're going to pulse throughout the year is we're only going to really, unless we've got some methods in place, pay attention to it at the end of the quarter. Oh wait, we got a quarter 1 target, and we pay attention to it at the end of the quarter. The reality is if we do it that way, our potential is a lot lower than what we'd initially set out to do. Now, one way that you can, and again, what are you doing? You're giving yourself multiple points along a line. I'm giving myself quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 results to predict what the actual year end will be. It's pretty rare that quarter 1, quarter 2 go along and all of a sudden you go hockey stick Q3, Q4 because you had enough runway to get there. That's tricky. So what you want to do is you want to tighten up the view within the 90-day period that you're looking at. So the way you're going to do that is you're going to basically break up each quarter. You're going to shorten that time of focus that you've had before from the very end to more consistent views of the business throughout the year. These are the months. So if I start to break it down into monthly routines or even into weekly routines, what you will find is that will accelerate the probability of success. Why? Because you're looking at the scoreboard, you're checking your heart rate at a more regular interval. You're not waiting. That's key. That's the learning. That's the difference between companies that grow and they don't grow, is they understand the difference between near-term, long-term, and they've got routines and regimens. So take a look at a newspaper. How is a newspaper read each day? Well, we got the weather, we got some headlines, we got some data, we got some variety in the story. We've got a sports story here. We've got a salmon ban up here. We've got dates associated with it. This is basically, if I lived in Portland, how I might on one page get a sense of what's happening in the Portland world. Headlines, weather, data, variety, dates, very time-bound, very specific. Your business is the same way. You got to look at data points on a weekly basis like a newspaper. What are the sales? What are the new customers? What's staff utilization? What's our pipeline growth looking like? How many leads did we generate last week? How many employees did we lose? What are the number of support calls that came in? You're going to build a scorecard that's going to look something like this. You're going to have metrics and targets, and you're looking at what it should be, aka the weekly target, and what you actually do week 1, 2, 3, and 4. This exercise is difficult because a lot of businesses says we've never looked at it weekly before. We've only looked at it monthly and quarterly and maybe just annually. In my career, I had an opportunity to work for Cisco, which is a machine in terms of how they manage the business weekly. One of the skills that we were taught is how to forecast weekly. We literally would come to the business and we would have an objective of what we would do that week. We reported on it that at the end of the week, and we'd come back and we'd do it all over again on a Monday and a Friday, Monday and a Friday. It was the quarterly regimen. And it is a regimen, it's a routine, and it will drive success within the business. I'm not suggesting you all do exactly like Cisco, but I am suggesting that you adopt the methodology at looking at quarterly and weekly. So let me give you a snapshot of something that you can do. Go home, identify 5 to 7 critical metrics in your business, make sure that those metrics can be measured, and do they evoke a reaction? In other words, does your heart rate change, when you experience it? And the third point is so important when you're selecting these metrics, because they will help you understand where it is that you're trying to go. Now we're coming in towards the end. I want to finish up one last concept and then maybe open it up to some questions here real quick. But I want to translate this idea of routines and metrics right down into organizational consistency. Somebody said at the beginning of the call that accountability is where it matters. Execution is where it matters. Well, part of execution has to do with the organization understanding what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. As a leader, if you expect execution, but you only ask at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter or the month, you're not driving consistency. So here are the realities. 70% of organization initiatives fail. You go out and say, hey, we're going to do it different now, guys. Well, most of them don't succeed. And the reason why they don't succeed is stemmed from a lot of things. So here's a quick question and answer for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, we have leadership consensus on our initiatives. Give yourself a 1 to a 10. We have consensus. Stacy, I'm going to ask you, what are we looking at on the 1 to 10? I'll keep going. All right, so let's go to the next one. Everyone's role on the leadership team and in the business is clear and understood. 1 to 10. We measure our success daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually. We got a lot of ways that we're measuring our success to know whether or not we're on track or off track. How about this one? We know when we're on track and off track. Weekly, we know every week exactly where we're at. 1 to 10. We're accountable. We have great accountability as a leadership team. So you scored yourself on that. Again, for the 8 or 9s, congratulations. Anywhere else on the spectrum, there's always an opportunity to improve. Let me give you an example of something you can do. This is a karate dojo. I don't know how many of you practice karate as a exercise regimen or otherwise, but karate is a very useful regimen because it teaches the principle of what happens when you get on the mat. When you get on the mat, there is a routine, there's a regimen. And within the business and within your team, you have regimens like a dojo, like literally structured. That exercise routine in a dojo does not last forever, right? It lasts for the duration of the exercise regimen. But how many of your meetings last longer than any exercise regimen should? Your meetings are going too long, they're ineffective, they're useless. I mean, the fact of the matter is most employees are saying they are frustrated with the meetings. 78% of them feel like the meeting schedule is out of control. 38% of them blame it on the managers. And a well-planned meeting is the number one reason why employees get excited about working where they do. So what I'm telling you here is if you want to get your dojo rocking, what you got to do is you got to look at what you're going to do on a weekly basis to fix this. So I'm proposing to you that you run a weekly meeting that is timed and structured and productive. And the way you can do this comes out of a methodology that I'm a big fan of called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. You may find others out there that are similar, but the EOS methodology is actually a really good one because it's timed, structured, and productive. On the right-hand side, you can see that there is really clear timestamps for what happens in the meeting. And you'll also notice that we're looking at scorecards, we're looking at rocks, we're looking at headlines, and then we're getting into the intricacies of the business. But with this IDS portion right here, you actually get the majority of time to talk about big issues in the business. Now, what's important about IDS is it focuses on what the root cause of issues are. So how many meetings have you been in that we just talk and talk and talk and talk, and we try to solve what we think are problems, and we never really solve anything? And the reason being is because we discuss and we don't move to really get to a root. And the way that you can fix this is by introducing asking why 5 times. So when you are discussing something related to your business and you see it rear its head, you begin to use the ask why 5 times as the tool to get to the root cause. That is discussion. You're giving yourself 60 minutes in your meeting to focus on it. For example, hey, we're off our sales target this month. Okay, why are we off our sales target? Because the sales team doesn't know about the new offerings that we have. Why does the sales team not know about the new offerings? Because we haven't put it down in writing on paper so that they can access it and sell it. Why haven't we written it down and put it in front of them so that they can sell it? Because we don't have anybody assigned to do that. Why don't we have anyone assigned to convert the offer into something that sales can sell? Bam, there's our root cause. It's not that sales are off, it's that we suck at communications, right? And that we've got to fix our communications to get that resolved. So let's just summarize really quickly. We're coming to the top of the hour, and I'm more than happy to stick around, Stacy, if we have a couple of questions, but let me just summarize what we talked about today. So the first one is cadence. So if you look at cadence, cadence is a melodic and harmonic configuration that creates a sense of resolution. We want to look at our business like a musical score. What should the chord be at the end of the quarter? What should it look like at the end of a year, 3 years, 5 years? And does it give us a sense of where 10 years will go? When we're solving problems, we address it very much by attacking the rocks first. Do the big things. That'll make room for the pebbles in the sand. Don't get lost in the sand. Scorecards. Scorecarding the business to get a sense of where we are and where we should be, looking at it over a regular interval, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. Don't get lost just talking about it once a quarter or once a year. And some of the metrics that you might incorporate include things like these. And then the last idea is a regimen, structured and rigorous, just like a dojo. It's time-bound, it's productive, and everybody finds value in that routine. So I want to thank you for your time today. Somebody in today's session will receive an opportunity to get some one-on-one time with me. And I would love to talk to you about some of the things that might be going on within your business and maybe share with you a couple of other ideas of things that you might be able to tackle that'll have a direct impact on how you can look at strategic planning and other things. So Stacy, I'm going to kick it back to you if we have any other questions that we want to answer, and thank everybody again for their time today.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand, or you can type it in the chat. I'm happy to share that question. I also want to let you know that this has been recorded. It will be available to you on our blog, and that's hermanproav.com/blog. So you can access this. You can actually also access our previous session as well. So if you weren't able to attend that session for some reason, that one is also available to you. We also ask that you fill out a questionnaire that we send out to you guys, and give us some feedback, if you will. So I don't see a lot of questions here, but there's still people hanging out. So if anybody has a question, we are happy to jump in. You can raise your hand or type it up in the chat. Again, if you are interested in lots of thank yous and great jobs, if you are interested in speaking with Jeff, his information is here. Maybe you want to take this a step further and get some one-on-one training. And like we said, we will announce a winner for the one-on-one session with Jeff in the next week or so. Okay, we do have a question. Do you offer a flyer or outline that offers overview for the rocks format?
I do not have a flyer or format, but if you want to dig in more to the rocks methodology, you can read a lot about it from Stephen Covey. So Stephen Covey has written quite a bit. He's the one that's credited really with the whole concept of rocks, pebbles, and sand. In terms of the structure that I shared with you today, that methodology has been incorporated into a number of different programs that I think that are out there. You might find one from Vern Harnish called the Gazelles. It's a scaling up methodology. I've referenced another one today called the Entrepreneurial Operating System by Gino Wickman, who's also written about the methodology. The approach is pretty common, and you might see it reskinned a couple of different ways. But I'd start with Covey, and then if you really want to dig in deeper, either Scaling Up or EOS are great places to find out a little bit more.
Great. All right, that looks like all the questions we have. Let me just do one more route through here. And again, I like to thank everybody for attending.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.